means that if John Aloisi can score this goal, Australia will be there.
Are you sure?
I'm trying to do my maths.
4-2. 4-2. He wins it for us. John.
Here's Aloisi for a place in the World Cup.
For us.
He scored! Australia have done it!
John! Come on!
John Aloisi, the Confederations Cup hero, has done it in the biggest game of all.
Come on, Australia!
Oh, it still gives me chills when I hear that moment in Australian football history as John Aloisi's spot kick took the Socceroos through to the 2006 World Cup finals in November of 2005. Of course, it's 20 years, and John Aloisi joins me now as we remember that day. Of course, he and Mark Schwarzer were the heroes. John, it's great to see you. Does it seem like 20 years ago, or does it seem like yesterday when you look back on that?
Yeah, sometimes it's like 20 years ago, but then other times when you start reminiscing and start talking about it like yesterday, it's amazing. 20 years and people still talking about it. That's the beauty of it. It's so much to so many people, not only us players that were involved, but also past players that missed out on World Cup, because we had a lot of heartache over the years, that finally to get there after 32 years. I think that's why it means so much, and it meant so much to people, not only back then, but even now, people still wanting to talk about it. It's pretty special.
Now, you grew up in Adelaide. I grew up in Sydney, and we both love football. I played as a kid. You went on to play professionally, but we know that football isn't the big sport in Australia. Why do you think that when these occasions happen, that everyone gets behind the Socceroos, and why is it a different level to some of the other codes?
I think it's because it's played all over Australia. Like you said, it doesn't matter where you grew up in Australia. It's played in, certain cities, certain towns all over Australia. It's the world game, and it's really the game that can unite everyone, no matter what background you come from. Because when you come to Australia, my family, my parents from Italy, that was a way to actually integrate into the community, was to play sport and to be involved at some sort of club level, and that's how we got to mix in with different nationalities, to know their cultures, their backgrounds. That's what soccer can bring and give, and the Socceroos and the Tildas are the best thing for that. You can really see the whole nation get behind our national teams, whether it's men or women, when they're playing important games.
Now, the amazing thing about this story that night, November in 2005, was John Travolta being in the dressing room. Of course, he was the Qantas ambassador. I think he flew you from Montevideo in the plane. Take us back to the euphoria in the dressing room and singing him that famous song from Greece.
Yeah, it was funny because after the game, we were outside for so long. We just couldn't believe the moment. It was an incredible moment. We dreamt about it for so long. Once we got into the change room, we were just drained mentally, physically. And so we're just sitting there, having a couple of beers, just chatting about the game. And then all of a sudden, John Travolta walks in, and then the energy came back, and we started to sing Greece songs to him. And I was a Greece fan growing up, and I know all my teammates were as well. So it was a bit surreal. It was one of the highlights, an amazing moment, and it was great to meet him.
We all remember where we were. Now, I've told you before, but I'll remind you, I was working as a football broadcaster in Singapore. Now, it was 11 o'clock in Sydney. It was 8 p.m. in Singapore, and I was about to go on to the sports news and present whether Australia had qualified or suffered more heartbreak. And I was with a guy that you might know called Scott O'Donnell, who's a former National Soccer League defender, who's a coach in Asia. So he was my expert. So I had two scripts there, went in there, and just as I sat down, your penalty went in, and I could read the happy news. But I tell you, it was so hard to concentrate as a football tragic. And I'm sure you get people today coming up to you and telling you all sorts of stories about, I've read people on their deathbeds and all sorts of things. Do you ever get sick of people coming up to you in the street and saying, hey, this is where I was?
I never get sick of it because I'm lucky that I was part of such a moment that impacted so many people on a personal level, and what it meant to them. It's great hearing their stories because we all know what it meant as players to qualify and to finally get to a World Cup. but we didn't have no idea how much it would impact the rest of Australia and the people that were watching it, whether they were in Singapore. So many people have told me where they were around the world as well. They weren't only here in Australia. They were watching it from, the States, from Europe. They could just find it somewhere in some remote pub. And they recall jumping up and down, celebrating, probably at 10 o'clock in the morning. So it's so incredible to hear the stories that people want to come and tell you. So I can imagine it would have been tough for you, because it would have been one of those moments that you're going, please go in, because I do not want to be reporting this in the mood that I might be in if we didn't go through.
Yeah, having two scripts there, and I could throw away the bad news script, more agony for the Socceroos. And I got to thank you, because when that goal went in, and then you started celebrating and at Stadium Australia there, that meant that I was going to be sent to Germany for a month to cover the 2006 World Cup, which I did. Not only was I at every Socceroo game, every training, I also got to the World Cup final, the Zidane headbutt, semi-finals, saw loads of games. So I got to thank you for that. But, I was a sports broadcaster for 30 years, John, as you know, and the 2006 World Cup, I've covered Olympics, I've covered grand finals, I've covered Grand Slam tennis, you name it, I've covered it. That was by far the best event I've ever done.
I can imagine, because even as a player, a lot of people ask me what was my highlight of my career. It was definitely at the World Cup. That 2006 World Cup, it couldn't have got any better. The way that the Germans organised the event, the games itself, obviously we were playing and participating in it and we went well, but just the whole atmosphere around. You were at the training sessions. To see so many Aussies come to a training session, never experienced that before. I think one session we had like nearly close to 10,000 people there. So it was just excitement. Everyone was happy. Everyone loved being in Germany. And I'm glad that you've experienced more than me. You've been to a World Cup final. That's pretty good. It's not bad.
I remember also in Munich, of course, Australia played Brazil in their second group game in Munich, and I was at the hotel with Dave Mitchell, who you know, and Tony Vidmar was there, and he didn't make it because of his heart condition, but I did a story on him. Husidink was there, so I got to meet him. And I remember, going to the training session there at the Allianz Stadium and sitting near Tony and Aurelio Vidmar and knowing they couldn't play. Aurelio was a bit old and Tony had the heart condition, and just thinking, wow, this team, the Socceroos, are going to be playing Brazil, and then putting on that performance against Brazil, which I think was the best performance, even though Australia lost 2-0, could have easily have been a draw, or even Australia could have nicked a win. But the thing about that game that I always remember, the Brazilian players only knew one Socceroo player, and that was John Aloisi. They said, we know the guy that plays for Osasuna. And of course, you'd already moved to Alaves by that point. But you were the one player that Ronaldinho knew, even though, there were Premier League players in the Socceroos squad. How cool is that?
Yeah, I remember seeing that. Ronaldo, they asked him, do you know Mark Viduka? Do you know Harry Hugh? And he goes, no, I know the guy at Osasuna. And it was quite funny that, they had some side. The Brazilian national team. That was obviously the team that 4 years earlier won the World Cup. A lot of their players were there, and they didn't have such a great World Cup in 2006. But you're right. I thought we performed really well against Brazil. We was 1-0 for a lot of the game. They scored the second goal right near the end when we were pushing, and easily got something out of that game. And that was the belief we had. We had a belief that we could beat anyone. We took Italy, very close. That's still one of those moments that really hurts, that the Italian moment when we conceded the penalty right at the end. And people ask me, where do you think you could have ended up if you got through the Italian game? And it's like, you don't know, because football is such a funny game. You could dominate a team and still lose. But we felt that we could have matched it against any national team during that period.
The Croatia game, I think the atmosphere was phenomenal there. I was there at Stuttgart, and of course there were a couple of Australian-born players in the Croatian squad. Josip Simonic got 3 yellow cards. You had a goal disallowed that I swear was a fair goal by Graham Poll, who probably refereed you when you played in England. Did you ever find out why that winning goal was disallowed?
I went up to him straight after the game because I was so upset. I heard him blow the whistle as the ball was going in the net, and I was thinking, well, what's he blowing for? And is he blowing for a foul? And so I went up to him straight away to say, why did you blow the whistle? He goes, for the end of the game. And I said, yeah, but I was scoring a goal. And he said, oh, don't worry, you're through anyway. I said, yeah, but we would have won our second game at the World Cup, and I would have had my second goal. So. I was disappointed, but then soon, celebrating with my teammates that we went through to the next round.
And the pleasing thing about these great moments the Socceroos had, the 2005 playoff against Uruguay and also the good performance in 2006 was people like you are now remembered as heroes, whereas that didn't happen. I've seen those commercials that you're in for a car and you're alongside other legends of sport. And that's a big step forward for football, wouldn't you say, when you look at the big picture?
It is. When I was growing up, and I remember Johnny Warren talking about this a lot. We have to try and make our players household names, and he used to mention it and saying that we have to push it. And there was players that played at a much higher level than what I did. Ned Zelic and Paul Ocon, and they were unfortunate they didn't go to a World Cup. They're probably not the household names here in Australia, as they're probably very well respected in Europe. But qualifying for World Cup actually did that for us. That helped, and it's you can see now with the Matildas as well. The way that they're going now with the last World Cup here. Hopefully, the Asian Cup, they have a great tournament. They're household names, and that's something that when we were coming through the national team, we didn't have until we qualified, and that's what hanging a World Cup can do for a nation.
Now, John, I worked in the UK in the 1990s with a guy from Coventry, and he asked me one day, he said, do you know an Australian player called John Aloisi? He's playing at Portsmouth now, and I think he might be coming to Coventry. And I go, yeah, he's a good young kid. I know he's from Adelaide. He's a good striker. You scored and played in the big three, and I don't think anyone else has ever done that. The Premier League, La Liga, Serie A. That's why I think you deserve a special place in Australian football history, because a work mate of mine from Coventry is asking me about you.
Yeah, at the time you don't really think about it too much. That once you retire, you might reflect a little bit about. I loved playing in Europe for so long. It was great playing in such top leagues. It was Serie A at the time was a really strong, tough league with players like Roberto Baggio and Baresi. They got to play against Maldini, and then going across the Premier League, that's when Man United won their treble during that period, and so it was this really top league as well. And then going to La Liga and being able to play against Real Madrid and Barcelona, the Galacticos at the time. So it was a great experience playing at that level, and obviously at the time you don't think about it too much. You just want to try and perform for your team and do well and try and win football games.
I mean, you are known as a bit of a legend in Osasuna as well, because you scored the goal that took the Copa del Rey final into extra time. So you're getting respect there as well. But you played for a lot of struggling teams, even though you scored 27 goals, 55 Socceroo appearances, which is phenomenal. And of course, the Confederations Cup in 2005, you were the second top scorer. But you're in struggling teams in tough leagues, having to score. And I reckon that toughened you up, along with some other players like Vinny Grella and Mark Bresciano, playing for not the top teams in big leagues, but the teams that are battling.
Yeah, it was tough because people in Australia probably don't realise that the relegation battle can be sometimes harder to play in than when you're going to win a title, because the pressures are there that you don't want to relegated, because it affects the whole community, affects the whole town if you do go down, because then the likes of Real Madrid or Barcelona aren't coming into your city, so you're getting lesser clubs, and so the financial side and the economic side of that town really can struggle. So it means a lot to people, and it did toughen you up because you had to deal with certain situations that weren't so easy, and as a struggling team, you don't always get that many chances to score goals. So if you do miss a goal, they let you know that you've missed. Where when you're in a better team, team or a bigger club, you get a few more opportunities. So, you know, they're going to come more often than not. So it was tough, but it was a good experience to actually gain resilience and your stay, you know, toughen you up as a person, but also as a player.
And speaking of tough people, Tony Popovic, your old teammate from that playoff in 2005 and, of course, 2006 World Cup. Now the Socceroos coach as we head towards 2026. I tell you what, mate, he has done a phenomenal job in bringing the culture of the Socceroos into that group. And also, obviously, his results have been good in qualifying. What would you say about Popper as we look forward to 2026? Is he the right man to have us do as well as you guys did in 2006?
Yeah, I think so. I think that Popper's very well organised. We all know that. We know that his team's really hard to beat, and I know we want to play a certain style of football and attack the opposition, which we will. But you also have to remember, individually, we probably haven't got the players to compete like some other countries have. So Popper will get them organised. He'll make sure that you know they all know their roles, their jobs, and he will prepare them as well as any other team in that World Cup. So I'm confident that we can get through the group stage. I really am. I think that once we do get through the group stage, then anything can happen. It's a knockout stage. So we've got some good young players coming through, exciting talent. And we've got some good experienced players to help those younger players as well.
John Aloisi is our guest, and can you believe it? He turns 50 in February of 2026. And I've got to ask you about something you went through health-wise, John, back in 2020, a bit of a heart scare. Luckily, you're still with us, but from what I understand, it was pretty serious.
It was actually 2019. I wasn't feeling too good, but not in a bad way. I was just short of breath. I just thought I was getting unfit. But my wife said, you know, go see the GP, and he, you know, did a test and listened to my heart and did ECG. He sent me to the cardiologist, and they found that I had a tear in my mitral valve, and I was leaking 50% of my blood. It was just rare that they say they can, you know, across the street and getting hit by a car. We can't explain why happened to you. So I had to undergo the following week open heart surgery to repair the mitral valve, and thankfully the operation went really well, and I'm as good as ever. And you know, it was you know, a moment that I remember clear, because you know, it was a little bit worrying that you start to stress about, you know, you ever going to be able to survive this, and when it happens to such an organ like that. So I suggest that anyone that has or feels in any way they're not feeling at their best, you know, go get a checkup.
Well, final thought from 2006, particularly that song that we heard for the America's Cup that got revived by Men at Work, the Down Under song. Do you remember that being played and sung by fans, and how did it affect you?
I remember it, but even before the games, when we were warming up, that song always got played, and it just gave us that lift, that because that's who we're representing. We're representing, you know, everyone from Australia, even though we're across on the other side of the world. We had great support, as you know, in Germany. And then after the games, you know, that song would come on again when we'd win. So such good memories that we have from that tournament.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to John Aloisi today. You deserve every pat on the back, every accolade, because you are a true Aussie hero who battled through incredible adversity, going to Europe as a 15, 16-year-old and then becoming a hero many, many years later, mate. Thank you so much for joining us.
No, thanks for having me on, Jason. It's been a pleasure. We haven't chatted for a while, so it was great to finally get on.